Hello and welcome to another meeting of the Geek Cabal. Cabal whisperings on our feelings on the use of science fiction and fantasy in games and just their strengths and weaknesses, depending on, I guess they're, if they're in board game or video game format,
Yeah.
what their strengths and weaknesses are. So we're going to do some ramblings on that. So join us today on that.
All right.
And I'm Jim, by the way.
Bob.
So this will be one of our single topic podcasts where we just kind of go over a single topic and a little shorter format.
Hopefully.
So
We always jinx ourselves by saying that, and 3 hours later, it's.
we want to have a diet version of the podcast where it's
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
still filling but less calories. Yes. But
Yeah. Something like that.
but anyway, so I mean, obviously uh, my expertise is going to come from the video game side of things. Yours is going to come from the board game side and miniature side and every other side besides that. And this actually kind of comes into play because we just did the Warcraft 2.
Yeah. That's when we were just debating what to talk about here. That's what we were. That's what inspired me. Plus, also had Star Trek on my mind, and I was like, well, it's right there, sci-fi and fantasy. We should note, just very briefly, we're testing out some microphones and some other equipment here. So if you do listen to this, please let us know how it sounds on your end, because we're trying to, make it sound a little bit better and clearer. So
and
if we've succeeded, let us know, please.
and I thought the lapel mics did good, but I don't think it had quite the range. It didn't. I think we had to boost the audio a lot of times, so maybe didn't sound as good. But anyways, to the topic at hand here. So, um, well, actually, speaking of Star Trek, I have that Star Trek. I don't want to say it's a board game. I think it's a role playing game kind of thing. That one box set of Search for Spock.
Oh, from Star Trek 3?
Yeah,
Yeah, it could be, or it could actually be a ship battle game.
yeah. I mean, it's got pieces and papers and all sorts of other things. I know it's not like a role playing game, but it's not a board game because I don't think there's actually a physical board of any sort. There may be tactical sheets and stuff, but I'm not really for sure. There's only really one even remote battle in that entire movie, so I don't know how they made a battle game out of it. Because the Grissom was definitely not a battle.
No, quite lopsided if it was.
So, um, and I think in a
That's why I was surprised when I saw it. I would have thought they would have gone Wrath of Khan, as the battle in the Nebula at the very least.
yeah, of course. But I mean, as far as it goes, I mean, I think both. I mean, obviously, both can play in both formats in some capacity. Because I mean, like we talked about Warcraft, and I mean, in back in the day, that was mastercraft of the fantasy type gameplay. And then we've always talked about like the Star Wars, the Tie Fighter, and the Star Trek games, and all of that.
Yeah, well, even just among the Blizzard titles, there's also StarCraft. So
Well, yeah. Um, but I think in at least when it comes to some of the like say D&D and stuff, I think at least when we're using the miniatures and stuff like that, the fantasy thing, I think, I don't know, just plays better to me than I think a more futuristic. I know that like they have Star Wars, and I believe they have a Star Trek role playing game where you can pretty much take your Dungeons and Dragons experience, put it into that, and I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just me. I mean, I can see that it all could work. I mean, it's all just of the mind. But the problem I think with a lot of sci-fi and that kind of stuff is a lot of things would just be solved with giant ships.
yeah,
And
I've said to Chad before, and I think I have said it in one of these videos that when it comes to like role playing games in particular, I just think fantasy's the better fit, and that could just be because that's what I'm used to, or because I just don't envision like how you start to begin to handle firearms with the rules. Because to me, that's the point where everything kind of falls apart. Because are all your skills based on how well you can aim? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Because I mean, I mean, you go to the game like Knights of the Old Republic, and you see where the role playing game starts to break down because you have to have, yeah, you can level up your Jedi skills. So there is, but see, that's a fantasy element
right,
to a science fiction thing.
right. That's why I think Star Wars kind of works because you still kind of technically have magic.
But I think if you took the same thing in Star Trek, I mean, the only thing you can do is upgrade your weaponry. I mean, yeah, you can become more skillful, a better shot and stuff like that, but there's just not as much. I mean, the problem is that you're still a human. It doesn't matter how skilled you are at a firearm. Once you get shot in the face, it's not going to be very, not going to be very pleasant for you at that point.
You wouldn't think so.
But that also may show why when it comes to a science fiction thing, maybe the best format is a video game format, just because it then you're bound to the rules of a computer telling you what you can do versus I just can imagine a you know dungeon master, whatever they're called in the Star Wars or Star Trek realm would be, trying to manage all this. And you're like, well, I'm going to get transported from here to over there. You're like, but you're like,
You mean the instantly summonable at almost all times teleportation spell,
yes,
basically? Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. I mean,
Well, that
like with Star Trek, I since I've never played any of the role playing games based on it, I've got to figure that it's mainly skills. There's got to be a lot of talking, and it's definitely got to be very team oriented if it's trying to replicate the show. I just don't know. Like, I just can't envision that like being fun though. But that's just me, and I haven't played it, so maybe it is.
well, and we've got some games on the uh, from Gen Con that we're going to have to try. I was talking to Owen about trying the Aliens game, and he wants to sometime all of us sit around and play that. That way, you can get a good review of that. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's that I think works as a board game in its own because you're confined to a certain spot. You don't have all the MacGuffins that sci-fi stuff has. You don't have a replicator. You don't have this. You don't have that. You have
Yeah.
the things that you can scrounge up, on a cargo freighter that you don't.
Yeah. I mean, sci-fi seems to work just fine for board games and miniature games. I mean, Warhammer 40K is primarily science fiction, even though there's fantasy elements to it. BattleTech is purely science fiction. Um, you've got other examples, I'm sure. Star Wars, like the fleet battle games, that's purely that's physics and lasers, basically.
Well, and after playing, I think it was Armada that we played in for Star Wars, that we learned real quick why, as a board game, I don't even know, miniatures game, whatever you call it, because the board would be the entire table if you or more. It was very much a learning curve to learn that, oh, I got to actually slow my ship down before I start making this turn, or
Yeah, you're just
um,
gonna fly off the table.
yes, and stuff like that. Well, it's a neat concept. I love the miniatures. I love all of that, but it's you're taking something that's supposed to be fast and action packed
And
and
slowing it
and
down.
slowing it way way down. Now, I'm not saying that anything is wrong with that because I mean when we played HeroClix, that was the very same thing. Realizing that rounds were seconds in time.
Yeah, I mean, well, even with Dungeons and Dragons, you have that. Because in theory, each turn is six. Well, each turn lasts takes each turn is 6 seconds. Uh, but that's like everyone's. So it'd be a round. Each round is 6 seconds. Um, and you get kind of the same thing with BattleTech. I think HeroClix kind of breaks the mold though because you're not stuck with in this round. I can move each of these pieces one time or something. Because remember, you could move them 2 successive rounds or occasionally three if you knew how to do it. Then you had to rest, which was a mechanic that's fairly unique to HeroClix, at least in my experience. Because I know, like the D&D miniatures game that came out along the same lines as it did, it was one round was everyone moves every one of their figures, move, attack, whatever. And then you go to the next round, and there was really no way to. aside from a handful of spells, and those just would grant an extra action. There was hardly any way to move to break that chain. And also with the Star Wars miniatures game, because the same company made it and very similar rules.
I think, but HeroClix, I think, got rid of the rest, or having to, or from no, they got rid of pushing, I
Yeah,
believe.
because everyone has willpower now, unless they changed it again.
Yeah, and again, some point, and say if we can get, like I said, the one time we can get Chad over here, we need to have the discussion on kind of why we left HeroClix.
Yeah.
And again, it's nothing bad. It was nothing wrong with the game itself. Um, there is, I mean, there was the thing of the rule change, and sometimes when you take something that's fairly established, and I understand bringing new people in, and I understand like modifying the rules, maybe having a beginner set of rules, and then expanding it to, a full set of rules.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a good thing, maybe it was a bad thing. It just the rule change, the pandemic, and all of that kind of was pushing us out. So HeroClix knowledge is I'm not very much up to date on it, but I do want to have a discussion, kind of more in depth of again why we left, and um, part of that's money because you can only collect so much.
Well, right, and like you said with the pandemic, like me and Chad were still just we were still buying cases of product, and we weren't doing anything with it. Like it was just piling up, and it's like I can only do that for so long, but I can't just stop if I'm still playing the game because I'm going to be missing those pieces. And I was just like, nope, nope, gotta put an end to this. So
So that's another thing we could even include that because like I mean heroes I think again they work in some formats like but I don't know how a hero based RPG would really work because it seems like again you would have to really tone back the powers or have powers develop over time, kind of like you're
oh, superhero based
yeah.
RPG. Yeah, I think the way I can't think of which one it is, but I've seen some of them that do exist, and I think the general idea is you're allowed a certain number of powers, or they're assigned values or something whenever you first get them, so that you can't be like, well, I'm just going to be Superman and be unstoppable. It's got to be like,
Yeah.
well, you've got to take flight or super strength or heat, something like that. And then as the game progresses, similar to with D&D, your stats go up. You might gain other powers, or you might gain another thing you can do with an existing power. Like superheroes like that, I could kind of see, and that would definitely be the big exception to the science fiction, in my opinion. But they're using superpowers, which are essentially what you've got in D&D,
Yeah.
because if you actually ever look at what the stats represent, like a baseline human should have, it's either an 8 or a 10 in basically everything. And if you get like an if you get if you this is I hate to keep calling back to 3.5, but there was no cap on the stats. So if you had like a 20 intelligence, or you just kept going, you were literally smarter than any human being who's ever lived in the real world. Like, and then it just keeps going beyond that. And same thing with strength. Like, you get to the point where I think you could literally lift well over a ton.
Well, and but in the superhero one, that was one thing I really had a hard time with HeroClix on is because you could have Superman going up against like Black Widow and
Yeah.
and get KO'd by the black, and when in no possible realm would that happen unless she's just shooting kryptonite darts at him. And
Right. Well, that's one problem I've said about HeroClix several times is if it's going to be accurate, then you're going to have every character is going to have one, maybe two clicks, and then there's going to be Superman with like a full dial of health, like may as well be infinity symbols for his power numbers, and you're not going to stop. He's literally going to have a power that says your powers won't do anything to me.
yeah, I mean, and most of the people he would punch, he would turn into Jello at that point.
Yes.
There would be nothing left. Um, but kind of going back, I think science fiction though really shines in the video game market just because one is you're taking stuff that can really be based in reality. So as far as a gameplay experience, it's less uh, less fantastical. It's something you get like, okay, I could see this happening. Even in a game like Dead Space, where you're fighting mutated humans that have turned into giant nasty creatures that you have to take their limbs off to stop them. You can't shoot them in the head, you can't shoot them in the torso. You have to chop their limbs off to get them to stop. Has some sort of realism to it because you're like, well, yeah, we don't know what's out there virus wise, what out there,
Yeah.
creature wise. Sure, it can happen. But then you play, a game like, you know, even like the Jedi Fallen Order, or cause I haven't played Jedi Survivor yet, but Jedi Fallen Order. I mean, you're out there doing double jumps and flips and throwing, stuff with your mind, and it's like, well, maybe if he was like not a human looking person, that I could kind of put myself. Don't get me wrong, it's still a great game, and I still love it, but it's not as I don't. I think it's one of those ones that's harder to put. Into it. Same thing, But then again, on another game like God of War, while Kratos has the powers of the God of War, uh, he's still bound to like a lot of normal stuff. I mean, he can't fly, he can't do crazy stuff like that. He has to use physical weapons to do things. I mean, obviously he's abnormally strong, but it's it still kind of takes you in a little bit more just because he doesn't do crazy stuff. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just rambling here a little bit because I guess in Jedi Fallen Order, he's Cal Kestis gets his ass kicked plenty of times by people that aren't even Jedi's that are just bounty hunters. And
Well, there's always the Force Unleashed if you want insane force power action.
oh yes, after I got the kind of mastered the ability of like grabbing people with the Force, I just half the people I just chucked over a ledge.
Yes, because the Star Wars universe is full of just like open ledges where people can just fall to their doom.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have those around my house, and no railings either, or
No,
railings
no,
that are obviously way too short for.
yeah.
I'm just thinking like half their walkways are just they have no rails on them. Like that thing that Obi-Wan had to get on to to deactivate the tractor beam. Who the hell designed that?
Same guy who designed the thing where the two guys are standing, where the giant cancer beam goes past them. Like those guys ain't having any kids being that close to that thing.
Because I mean, I get that you don't want obviously people getting to it, but you put security guards. You don't put like death pit because you're like, oh, what happened
Well,
to
what
what?
about Technician Larry? He's got to get over there somehow.
Well, technician Larry's now at the bottom of a chasm
Yeah.
because he sneezed and fell.
Or they can always send Matt.
The radar technician.
Yes.
Well, yeah, he could use the force. But anyways,
But I do think one. It's not so much a role playing game, but it has some of the characteristics of them is the Mega Man series, and there it kind of works. Because you do get things to increase your health. If it's the X series, you do get things to increase the power of your weapon. You do get armor things to increase things, and as you defeat enemies, you get their abilities, which you need to defeat other enemies. So there it kind of works because none of it's really like, oh, this makes you shoot like more accurate or anything like that. It's the other things, and then of course command mission is straight up a role play is straight up an RPG. And I'm trying to remember. I don't think it did anything to your accuracy, but I know your weapon power increased throughout the game.
well, and actually, like in Knights of the Old Republic, you never got more accurate with your shots because it was still a dice roll. It was like, I guess it was, you know,
Well, I always assumed it did. I always played a force user, so I don't, I did fiddle the moment I could ditch the firearms, I did.
well,
Um,
yeah, but you still had to give your firearm to,
I
you know,
just I let those fools do whatever.
you
Um,
never upgraded their firearms.
well, I did as I'd get better weapons. Of course, then I learned my lesson with Karth, that bastard. When he just ran off on Rakata Prime. He had good armor and weapons. I was really pissed at that. Never did find him.
And that's why before you leave, you're like, oh yeah, by the way,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I didn't realize that.
I know.
So, if I ever play through the game again, which I'm tempted to do, so I can kill his son right in front of him, uh, that'll make up for it a little bit.
You want to talk about it, Garth?
Yeah, apparently you can try that. He's just like, no, screw you.
My question is that I wonder after that moment in time if you could come back to the light side.
Probably. There probably aren't any hard points that stop you, except maybe towards the finale, 'cause there's just not enough game left.
Because even following the light side path, you still end up in the Sith Academy. So
Yeah.
what would stop you from just killing him there and then becoming good, and then Karth just praising you?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I don't remember how well the logic was. Like, Karth will remember that kind of stuff. I don't know it was that good. I think if you did everything right, that one negative moment, I just wonder if Karth would be like, "Wow, you're the greatest Jedi in the galaxy," except for that murdering of my son.
Yeah, I don't know. I played Dark Side all the way for both games, so
Well, that's the easy way. It takes the least amount of time. It's funny in that game because it literally is the easiest path.
yeah. Yeah, someone told me the light side path's a whole bunch of just boring baloney and giving away your money, and I was like, oh, screw all these people.
I did what I could, but if there was like a time where it's like, we want you to do this, and I'm like, "Yeah, that's going to take like an hour or 2 hours of my life. I'm going to, nobody's going to miss this guy." It's like,
There was one instance, and I don't remember if it's in the first or second game. I think it's the second game where, uh, like, I was trying to play both sides. Like, I was siding with the mercenaries. But then the mercenary leader did something to piss me off, so I started attacking him, and then ran away from the army. And I showed up and I was like, to the sudden, like, "Hey guys, the mercenaries are coming. We got to fight them." So I tried to rally them to fight the mercenaries. And then, like, once I killed the mercenary leader, whichever Jedi Master was there, he's like, "Your machinations in here and now," and I was like, "Whoa, dude! I just saved your bacon. What the hell are you doing?" And yeah,
because he knew you were playing both sides.
I guess.
Again, here we go, getting off topic. So,
Now it's on topic. We're talking sci-fi and video
yeah.
games,
We,
but no, like I said, the main area where it falls apart for me is it tends to be role playing games, digital or real. Most of the other places, you can make it work. Like board games for sci-fi settings, sure. That's relatively easy. Um, even though I lean towards the fantasy, that's because of the trappings of the setting. It's not because it necessarily makes a better game.
yeah,
You know,
because with the role playing, unless you have some way of stripping all of that technology off, where, oh, the role playing setting is that you're on a ship and it crash land, and you're one of the 100, let's say it's a generational type ship, and it's crash lands, and you're of 1,000 people that survived, and you're out trying to do your own thing. So, like, the stuff that you're gathering when you have to find the technology or whatever, it's just whatever you can scrounge up, and where you're not just, because you're not, you take away that part where uh, all that technology is just right there at your hand, at your fingertips or whatever. You may be able to get by with it like that, or because otherwise you're only going to be having like a couple of people in your party, and you can't just have a way to just infinitely jump around space doing whatever you want to do.
yeah. Well, like with real time strategy games, both seem to work just fine.
Oh yeah, because
Um, at least the ones I've played, it does seem to be that the sci-fi ones seem to come up with some kind of baloney substance that you're harvesting. Because like fantasy, it's like, okay, well, here's the lumber, here's the gold mine, and
and the
whereas sci-fi, it's like, oh, here's the alien metal that crashed to Earth. That's Tiberium for those of you that don't know, or ore and gems in the Red Alert timeline. You know, instead of and in Command and Conquer Generals, it's just supplies, just a big mound of supplies.
yeah, they'll just crop up wherever somebody planted a fresh planting of supplies out
Yeah,
there.
shipping containers out in the middle of the field. Yeah,
Yeah, the one with Warcraft 2 that always got me is that the supplies that you needed for your boats besides wood and whatever was oil, and so you had to have like an an oil rig out in the ocean. Then you had to have things go out there and get the oil and bring it back.
yeah. I know for Dune, at least Dune 2000. There's only one thing you have to harvest because at the end of the day, the spice must flow. So that's all you're after, the spice.
I
and
mean,
you're just instead of trying to say, oh, you're building it with this, no, it's currency to buy everything.
well, if they made a or a real time strategy game for the Soylent Green universe, you could just be harvesting people.
Yeah, you ever actually seen the movie?
No, I need to watch it. I know, I know.
Well, there's a riot scene at one point, and they're like, bring in the scoops, and they're dump trucks that have like a shovel scoop in front of them. They just scoop people up and toss them into the back. And like the implications, I'm pretty sure they were being arrested, but you never know.
I don't know. I'm pretty sure if you're scooping people off the ground with some sort of loader like that, the people in the front are getting their legs broken.
Well, one guy did get killed, but he was there when the thing came down. He was too busy trying to shoot Charlton Heston because Charlton Heston knew too much. Yeah, Soylent Green, folks, you should definitely check that out if you haven't already.
I think what we've got kind of what we've come to the conclusion is technically everything can work in every single format. Um, while science fiction seems to tend better for video games and fantasy tends to be better for role playing games. When it comes to board games in general, like actual physical board games,
Yeah,
like the Alien one or whatever, it's a free for all because you got to set rules in there. You can't have people making anything up as they go. They're not going to come up with their own stories and such to complicate things. But I mean,
yeah,
with the right set of rules, the right set of anything, I mean, technically every genre can become something.
yeah. Because I mean, like I mentioned, there used to be a D&D skirmish game, which that's what the miniatures were for, and it was essentially like to strip out the role playing element and have just the combat, just tactical combat with maps and things like that. And I thought it worked just fine. And at the same token, the same company using basically the same rules is like, here's Star Wars, and it worked. It's just that no one had magic. Some people had force powers. And there was either, instead of ranged and melee, there was just ranged and not ranged.
And I think the one thing that helps Star Wars out is that if you're not a Darth Vader or Luke Skywalker, and you're just your average Force user, they're not unstoppable by any means. Regardless of what the new Ahsoka series shows you, regular old Jedi's are not this unstoppable force. They're
Oh, I found that out in one particular game against Chris. So the force users all had force points, and one thing you could spend them on was to re-roll your attack rolls. And I had Palpatine, who had triple attack. That's three separate rolls on a d20, where I believe I needed a 4 to hit. So those three plus the re-roll, I missed all of them. With a 20-sided die, pretty sure I only needed a 4. Might have only been a 3. And literally, I just turned to Chris and I was like, "Well, the game is yours to lose, my friend. Like, I can't, if I just can't hit apparently. So good luck." And
yeah.
naturally, Palpatine got ventilated right after that. So
Again, one of those that it shouldn't have mattered. You should have been like as long as you don't roll a one,
yeah,
um, because as much as we bash the sequel trilogy, they did at least get Palpatine's power set right. Maybe a little overpowered, but not if it is by not by much.
well, the one thing I do like about that is that, unfortunately, because of the limitations of technology and storyline at the time, the original trilogy, you just don't see the Jedi just go all out. Okay,
Yeah.
you don't. So because of that limitation, you don't see it a whole lot in the prequel trilogy either. Because then the natural question is, well, if Obi Wan can do this here, why didn't he do it later? And same thing with Vader.
Well, and I think the arena battle in Attack of the Clones shows about how efficient the Jedi can be when dinosaur head guy gets
Yeah.
easily shot and whatever. Don't get me wrong, Django Fett is he's a badass. He's going to be able to do it, but um, when you see Mace Windu show, this is how like I don't think Mace Windu broke a sweat.
Yeah, probably not. But the point is, like, the novels and comics and everything else, even though I know Disney's tossed them aside, they have new ones. Uh, like they embrace just a bunch of other powers that we just don't see. So having that one moment in Rise of Skywalker where Palpatine just cuts loose, that was definitely the highlight of the movie for me. I was like, all right, well, at least now on screen we've got someone just going ape shit with their force powers here.
By the way, did you watch the Critical Drinkers video on why getting stabbed with a lightsaber would be terrible?
No, but I'm pretty sure I can figure it out.
Well, he was talking. The biggest one is that, well, first of all, is that he said the blade itself would burn 5 times hotter than the sun. So stabbing somebody with that would cause the water in them to not only separate between hydrogen and oxygen, but then or spontaneously combust.
Yeah, there's that, or even if it's not that hot, it's still hot enough because what people say is, "Oh, it'll cauterize the wound." Yes, it will after it gets done burning everything around it
Well,
too, because of the sheer amount of heat. All of a sudden, it's gonna like because there's no space. Like it's gonna go into one organ, cauterize it, but everything connected to that is gonna be incinerated too,
I mean, she'd
or
have
flash fried or something.
whatever organ they stabbed would be gone. It's no longer there. That organ is gone.
Yeah.
Not only that, and I don't know why I didn't even think about this, is she she stabbed. Why didn't she just, instead of pulling out?
Or
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
Yeah.
There is no need. There is no reason why that didn't happen. Sabine, I'm sorry, you should have been dead. And again, I know we're not supposed to be talking spoilers there, but I mean, she, the beginning scene, she ended up in the hospital. She got stabbed. That's not
Yeah.
spoiling anything.
Yeah. Now, things like that you got to chalk up to, well, it's not an R-rated movie. It's not an R-rated show. Because you're right. Wielding weapons like that, we should probably be seeing a whole lot more missing limbs, decapitations, being sliced in weird angles.
Well,
And
there's an entire Jedi technique about, when I say disarming someone, I mean literally
yeah.
taking limbs off. Um, because I mean, as much as they believe in not killing people, they don't seem to care too much about maiming somebody.
Well, I
And
mean,
if they're an aggressor, I guess it doesn't really matter at that point. But
well, it's not just that, but think about it. Think about everyone who gets injured but survives. Do we see them walk around with crutches or
oh
anything?
no, they
No,
got.
they get cybernetic parts. So the Jedi are probably like, I didn't kill him, taught him a lesson.
But could you imagine? I could imagine an RPG going around where your character starts off as a human, but then you end up as a cyborg, where you're pretty much just your brain in a jar. At that point, that's how I would end up, because I would be like, I'm gonna go in, and then roll my dice, and I'm like, oh, I can't block, can't hit anything. It'll be the basilisk all over again.
Yeah, maybe. There's a Forgotten Realms book where there's a Thayan who survives the Thayan Civil War, and so survives the time jump to a century later by becoming a brain in a jar. And he's got this massive fortress that he's had built, and he has like a robotic scorpion body that he's had built. Well, not just scorpion, but also has like a humanoid upper torso, if I remember right. And like once he knows the other people are coming, he like activates it, like puts the brain down inside of it to control it, and takes off to go fight him.
Gosh, that reminds me. That makes me think of what's his face. The
Krang.
no, that well, but he wasn't just a brain. It was just he had a scorpion body. I don't know. My brain's going. He fought the X-Men, I believe.
Mojo.
Well, Mojo too. Yeah, hell, he's got scorpion body. No, it was the guy that turned himself.
Cameron Hodge.
Yes.
I was gonna get there eventually.
Well, I guess technically, at some point in at least the animated series, one guy turned himself into a spider slayer.
Yeah, Alistair Smythe.
Yes.
Well, he didn't turn himself into one, but yeah, turned into one.
Not by choice.
No.
Well, you failed the kingpin too many times, and even though the kingpin's like, well, you couldn't do any better, so
Yeah, his replacement wasn't exactly a great asset to the team either. So, pretty sure David Warner the voice of his replacement, of Star Trek 5 and 6 fame. The Federation ambassador then played Chancellor Gorkon. We talk about that in our Star Trek retrospective. You folks should check out if you haven't seen it. But yeah, no, like Jim said, there's like most it'll work. These things will work for both. It's all a matter of probably the right property and trying to find the right fit.
Yeah, because I think any of it can work in any sort of whatever, but I think we were kind of more going over the general things that you have to think about when putting these things together. Because if you're doing a science fiction role playing game, you have to think, okay, we can't just give them access to everything in the world. Um, we can't be like, oh, you're in this future. Well, first thing I want to do is put myself into a robotic body that has you have to be able to
Yeah,
limit
I'm
it.
gonna cyber link to the body across space so that I'm over here just fine, and the body's gonna do all the work. And similar to D&D, where at least in 3.5, you'd be like, all right, well, I'm gonna go create a pocket dimension. I'm gonna hide in there, and it's my astral projection that's gonna be going on this adventure with you guys. So good luck. There's no way I can die unless someone attacks my body, which they don't know where it is, so that can't happen. And yeah, I'm just going to go with the astral projection here.
But um, I mean, I think, like I said, I guess if you're designing games or whatever, these are all things that you have to think about.
Yeah,
And
well, it's kind of like you mentioned, like with Alien. A game for Alien is going to be radically different than a game for Aliens. Because Alien, you're trapped on the ship with the killing machine. Aliens, you brought the firepower. Not that it's going to do you much good if you copy the movie, but you've got it as an option.
well, I think the whole movie would have gone differently if they had an idea of what was in the reactor room. They wouldn't have gone in there.
Yeah, yeah. No, if they,
If they knew ahead of time that, oh yeah, there's no saving these people, and they ended up fortifying one of the buildings over there, I think it'd have been a different story. I don't think the aliens would have. I don't think they would have won that encounter at that point.
well, I mean, like you said, I don't think they'd even go in there because they lost partially because they didn't know what they were going up against, partially because they were overwhelmed, which would have happened even with all their weapons. But the big factor was they couldn't use most of their weapons.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like if they would have if they would have known not to go in there, they would have never had to disarm. So they'd still have all their weapons. There'd be more of them left. They could put a much bigger dent in the number of the aliens, and then say screw it and nuke the site from orbit.
Well, I mean
That's
that
the
should.
only way to be sure.
I mean, I know they wanted to get an egg back, but hell, they could have done that without having to deal with any of the aliens there.
Well, Burke wanted to get an egg back. I'm pretty sure no one else on that mission was down for that. So,
Yeah.
especially not Ripley.
No, not at all. All right. Well, you got any closing thoughts on this one? As I said, we're attempting to try to keep this short.
Yeah, I think that's probably about it. I think I've harped on about how I just don't think RPGs and sci-fi go together quite as well as fantasy does. But that could also just be a bias towards fantasy because I'm more used to that in RPG. So you can obviously take RPG-like elements as the Mega Man game show.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't be a straight-up conversion. And
Yeah.
then there was also D20 Modern, which I never played, which I guess sorted out the whole guns and grenades and everything rules.
Well, I guess they played an RPG with an RPG.
There you go. Yeah,
I don't.
get, get,
What I have, I don't need accuracy.
get the old Scorpion RPG out. You know,
From Nightfire. Because I think the Scorpion from GoldenEye or from 007 Nightfire was the one you could rocket control. I think it was the guy.
It's the Scorpion of the Sentinel.
Oh, it's Sentinel. Because one of them was not guided, but could be. I think it was a heat signature, and the other one was guided.
Yeah, me and Gabe play the hell out of that. We would normally we would play the chateau level.
Well, yeah,
We
because
get the two buildings at the end, But occasionally it'd be time for the missile fight at knife range. We'd play in like the sub pen where it's just the one room. Everyone starts with rocket launchers, preferably the heat seeking ones. You just run along, just fire, and see when one just slams into you randomly.
Well, the sub pen did have some doors in it. 'Cause I remember at least one time that I launched one because I saw on the map that there was somebody coming up to the door, and I was launched one to the door, and they like open the door, and the missile goes in and hits them right in the face. And I was like, no, what I would end up doing on the chateau one is I would stand on the top of the roof, all the way back around the there's like a roof line where you could get behind the roof line. I would fire it, and if I was good enough, I would actually fly into the door of the,
Yeah.
and somebody would come running out. And
Yeah, yeah. I used to be good enough to get the missiles inside the buildings and get a fair way into the buildings with the twists and turns. Or I would like get onto the tram, not the tram, the elevated trolley kind of thing,
yeah,
and fire the missiles out of that, and then just like find people on the map and you know,
uh, I just remember the goofy costumes or goofy like Bond outfits you get because you have like Bond in the Moonraker outfit.
yes, from space.
Yeah, so he's got a spacesuit on.
Yeah, he was like because me and Gabe we got tired of just being us. We put a bunch of AI bots in there too. Vaughn in the spacesuit was he was a staple of those missions. Him, Renard, Zinnia on the top. I usually wouldn't put Odd Job in there.
Zodjob still had the same kind of.
He had the one hit kill with his hat.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because I don't think he was as hard to hit as he was in Goldeneye. Because in Goldeneye, it was like you couldn't play his odd job. Everybody's like, no, it's just a written rule. No playing his odd job because he was shorter than everybody else. If you want,
He shouldn't be though.
if you wanted to, I don't know why he was, but yeah, he was definitely short enough that you had to aim down to shoot at him.
Yeah.
Like they made him a little person. Versus, if everybody wanted to play Jaws, you're like, sure, go ahead, play Jaws. Like you'd be coming up a set of stairs, and I could hit you in the face before you could even, see me at the top of the stairs, or your gun could aim at me at the top of the stairs, or whatever. So,
Yeah. In Nightfire, I think you were asking for trouble if you put in Scaramanga as one of the AIs. He's the man with the golden gun. So his accuracy is pretty on point. Plus, it's Christopher Lee.
all right, well, it's getting late.
Yeah.
I've got some, I've got my kids here today, and they're still up and gaming upstairs, so I need to probably be getting them, ready for bed or whatever. But, anyways, say, I guess we definitely want to hear your comments in the in the comment section down below. See what you think. If you think kind of the same way we do. I mean, obviously these are all just opinions, and hell, tonight my opinion may change on exactly what I just said here, but
Yeah, you never know.
just kind of the rambling thoughts that I had. But yeah, definitely let us know in the comments what you think. What formats do science fiction, fantasy, you know, the superhero fall under science fiction?
I generally well Marvel for sure because most of those characters their science is their origin.
Yeah,
Bruce Banner's the gamma bomb, Captain America's super soldier serum, Parker's the radioactive spider, the X-Men are the atomic age.
yeah. So,
Uh, and DC, most likely as well because like Clark's an alien and you get the Speed Force. Like you've got some mystical characters, but by and large, comics are science fiction.
yeah, just let us know what you think, and if there's anything that we missed that you felt like, oh yeah, this definitely kind of is something people have to think about before turning that into a board game or an RPG or even uh,
or,
even
or, or possibly if you agree or disagree with us, let us know where like something more in between fits, like Western. Does Western work for all genres?
well,
There's a question for you folks.
well, yeah. So and also do the normal stuff, the like, share, subscribe, that kind of stuff. Hit that bell notification. Do all of that. And I think that's going to adjourn this Geek Cabal meeting.
I think so.
So,
So thank you folks for listening.
and we'll catch you on the next podcast.
Alrighty.
See ya.
Adios.